Choking on my energy drink. Hello and welcome to my cellar. Got a lot of interesting things to talk about tonight, just besides the comments. New book I found, convention I just went to, great player I had the fortune to have at my table, and a really good book. But we'll start with the comments. The bit about the Eurocentricity reminds me. The original Oriental Adventures book mentions a playtest group in Japan. Do I recall any details about that, or do I know who the motivation behind sending the book out to Japan for playtesting? It's always seemed to me that the book was an earnest attempt at broadening the game and being more inclusive, even if it did end up leveraging stereotypes people are not fond of nowadays, and that this playtest group is a testament to that earnest intention. That was after my time. We never knew. We were quite surprised when it became popular in non-English speaking countries. And there were some people in Japan that were very early adapters, or adopters, if you will. This is only what I've learned after the fact, and most of it is just what I've been told, not necessarily facts. There was a group that played, a fairly substantial number of players that all knew each other, and something triggered somebody somewhere that it might be a good idea to appeal directly to that market. And I'm not sure if that's when they started doing translations into other languages. I couldn't tell you. Yeah, they tried to make it more inclusive, and by the standards of its day, it was a fairly decent attempt. Now, since we become so woke, and have been legitimately pointed out some stereotypes that we don't need perpetuating, it has come under some criticism. But it was not purported to be written by an Asian expert. It was not sold as being expert. It was really a bunch of stuff for a bunch of white kids in North America and England to dabble in the Orient. No more, no less, of just an attempt to reach out to a possibly new segment. Beyond that, I really couldn't tell you, except, again, that's one of those things that we had no way of picking up where it was going to be popular. And we're often surprised when we found out. So, sorry I can't give you any more facts on that. And again, yes, there were some stereotypes. It's my experience, in my opinion only, that the stereotypes that were used then were not done, for the most part, were not done maliciously. It was an easy shorthand. Now, the stereotypes of the Japanese during the Second World War and the cartoons and everything, that was hateful and malicious. They all had squinty eyes and wore glasses and couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. But that's propaganda. That's a whole different ballgame. I loved your last piece about ethos, Sarah. Thanks for that. I'm teaching the game to kids, the White Box RPG, by the way, every other Saturday with the support of municipality. And I remind my players very often that, yes, sometimes they'll be finding themselves killing things. But even that we conveniently. Sorry, I should wear my glasses. We conventionally will never consider them worthy of living in our, because in our game, evil will always have the capital E. And by also being in hiding for the first lethal strike to free people, something to be stopped. Besides, I convey the idea that fighting should always be the last option. Anyway, thanks for the insight about ethos. Let's stay human and compassionate also. Always. Yeah, thanks. And yeah, it's a good point. Ethics are a slippery thing. A brutal, I want to say, ill-educated group will have baser ethics than a better educated group will have. Education has a lot to do with it. The ethics are also subjective. Somebody else in a different culture can have what they consider to be an ethical reason for doing it that we don't understand because we don't see what's behind it, and therefore we say it's unethical. That's something that can be explored. Yes, in this game, you may have to fight stuff, and you know, that is what you are doing, after all. At the beginning of the game, you're setting out to be an adventurer and do good things and battle the forces of evil. There are always forces of evil in our world, and as much as we'd like that not to be true, there's always forces of evil in the world today. Putin being one of the biggest ones, and the Chinese Communist Party being another one. And then little old Kim in his Korean mountain fastness shooting his missiles. There's no doubt about that all three of them, particularly Putin and Kim, are capital E evil. In the game, you're out to do good and fight evil. Now, a lot of how this can be taught can be done in the structure of the adventure. If you're out to right wrongs, to free the people, liberate the oppressed, easy peasy. And just like everything else, ethics gets a little murkier when the goals and the purposes are not as clearly defined. But I think it's well worth keeping in mind that, yes, it is there. And, of course, that lets out the trope, or the, I don't know what word it is, but the merry band of murder hobos who just go about the countryside killing everything. Now, if they're in an evil country, hey, just kill everything you see because it's evil and it's going to kill you if you don't. Again, yeah, the ethics thing, there should be ethics always, but they get slippery when you try to squeeze them too hard. You said something in passing that I think is profound. I did? You said, it's up to the DM of the die roll. That is a comment that is so profound, and sadly more and more is argued as unfair and not followed. Sage advice as always. Well, that was somebody else's column in the magazine after I left, but thank you. It is. I just came back from Game Hole, and I'll only briefly because I'm going to talk about the whole count at the end. I ran 5 games that are old school, a lot of dice rolling. The players roll almost all the dice that affect them. If they get hit, they roll their own to see how hard. If they hit, they roll 2 hit, and then if they hit, they roll damage. And about the only dice I ever roll are initiative dice, and for the bad guys, whether or not they hit. Everything else is in the hands of the players. Now, when somebody says, well, I think I'm going to try so-and-so, I can, as the DM, say, okay, give me a roll against your dex, your dexterity, because it's some leaping, daring-do thingy. And I can let him make a straight-up roll. I can handicap the player, and I keep saying him because I'm old. I can handicap the player by affecting the dice rolls by plussing or minusing, or I can aid the player by plussing or minusing, and they roll and I interpret, or in this case I pre-interpret what will work and what won't. I think that's the DM's job, to roll as few dice as possible, let the players do all the dice rolling, That keeps them more involved in the game. It keeps them focused on what's happening now. And I can interpret dice rolls. And as a DM, you come across a complex. Do I have any idea what this is? And you can say, well, roll a 20, let's see. And they roll a 4. Nope, not a chance. They roll a 12, or whatever. And okay, well, it looks like it might, maybe it's something like, or something else again. And if they roll a 17 and they got good wisdom and all that, and I'm not having them roll against their wisdom. I'm having a roll to see how well they're exercising their wisdom. But that's the way I do it, and that's the way I do it on the Wheel of Blame. And I find it works well for me, and I can certainly say that I had 5 tables of 7, sold them all out, and not a single person left one of my tables without having laughed a whole lot and had a good time. What kind of villain factions do you like in your game world? I remember when chaos anti-heroes were popular and the pewter miniatures reflected their chaos theme. Well, yeah, if you look at the old Ralph Partha stuff, now Iron Wind, the Chaos Wars, I don't have villain factions. Now, if I had a large overarching campaign, yeah, there might be, there might be an Assassin's Guild present, whether or not they'd actually have an effect on the game. I really just, the way I like to play is I like to give you this bad guy, or maybe not bad, but it's up to you to determine for you. Draw swords and charge. This bad guy and his minions, but it's in a somewhat localized thing. If I was running a grand campaign, there might be some grand evil dude that's pulling strings through all these different shires and influencing things, but no, I like a boss and his bad guys. That's the kind of villains I like. Then it's easier to fight against him and whatever. Alright, let's see, new page. I started playing D&D around the start of 3.5, and the mentality of players back then was mostly power gaming, with little care for role play or the wider narrative of a campaign, usually devolving into who could break the game faster. Now, in the modern 5th edition, it's been a complete shift, where new players only seem to care about making self-insert original characters, with little care for the gameplay, and rather just play out their characters like a soap opera. I've since gotten more interested in running a more old-school versions of the game, and was wondering what you would find to be the perfect balance between role-play, gameplay, and how you prefer to run your games. Well, first off, I don't do voices. I don't expect my players to do voices. Occasionally, I will use my vocal cords in dramatic fashion, but I don't talk high if I'm a fairy, and I don't talk low if I'm a cave bear. Okay, I don't do that. And I don't really care if the people at my player table do, but they usually soon see that I'm not impressed by it, and it probably hurts their throat anyway, so they go back to talking like people. I like, in terms of, how do I like the framework? I like the framework of old school in that everybody's their own actor, if you will. Everyone has much more freedom of choice, and that aids in character development as well as being very important in actual gameplay, I think. I want to run a game where the players just have tons of choices to not railroad them down the thing. Now, my Wheel of Blame game that I run at cons and online. And, oh yes, by the way, Okinawa, we're good as soon as everything's completed. Those have complete character license. And the wheel is not necessarily blamed to be a series of horrible combats, but a series of puzzles and obstacles, some of which might have to resort to brute force, but many of which can be thought around, and clever gameplay is always rewarded. That's what I like. That's why I run the wheel. I love giving people puzzles. Now, I'm not talking about, the Gordian knot or anything. I want to give them, okay, they know what they got to do here, and holy cow, this is what they're faced with. All right, how's it going to go? I like to make the players think on their feet in that regard. The way my Wheel of Blame game works is more feet, more brain, less arms, less legs, okay? It's player agency is completely unfettered for the most part. That's the way I like to play. I like to play if I were going to go back and do another campaign, which I'm thinking about publishing another thing that is a campaign almost. I still want to have a lot of player agency available. I don't want to make it a railroad. I want to allow them to make some choices of their own, but I also want to allow the DM to modify it, add in his stuff, and make it his own. I don't expect it to be run as written. No. I don't expect that. If that is what it is and you're happy with it, I'm okay with that. But I'll bet you can put your own touches on anything I put out like that. Make it your own, and therefore make it just that much better. Player agency is a big part of it, of a good campaign. And, I agree with some of your characterizations of the players of the different editions. And it's interesting to me to watch how it's morphed all these years, 48 years now. Yeah, let's see, 74, 26. Yeah, 48 years. And to watch how it's, the phases it's gone through. In the very first couple of years, it went through several phases of shifting ideas of how it should be played or how it could be played. And then with the various editions, the fact that not all of the editions were very well done or very well thought of, I was okay with the second edition because it cleaned up a whole lot of errors and omissions that got through. I didn't edit that one. I think they just cranked out 3 because they needed money. But, that's just my opinion. Roleplay, gameplay. Roleplay does not mean having a squeaky voice. Roleplay means playing and thinking and acting within the limitations of your stats. If you don't choose to play a player with high wisdom, for instance, use that as your dump stat, well, don't be coming up with great ideas, because a good DM is going to go, oh, come on, who are you kidding? Your guy wouldn't have thought of that. And stats are a limitation and a license. And you have to remember that. Can't be having perceived profound insights when your wisdom is a 9. That's not playing the character. And that's role play. No dressing funny, no talking funny. It's living up to and working within the boundaries of your stats. Okay, now, This is a series of questions about a couple of the magazines I worked on. So I'm going to read them all, and then I'm going to answer them in one fell swoop. How did you plan your time around the publication schedule for the Dragon? How much prep did it take to get the magazine ready for print? How difficult was it to get enough material for the magazine? And did this change over time? When you started Adventure Gaming Magazine, did you have the same schedule for putting the magazine together as you did with the Dragon? What was the biggest difference in terms of the workload between the two? What was the best thing about Adventure Gaming Magazine for you, or what did AG do best? Okay, number of nice questions there, and I'll attempt to answer them all at once, so to speak. So listen carefully. When I started in TSR, I took over the strategic review. Now, to understand how we put out the strategic review and then Dragon and Little Wars, you have to understand offset printing. Okay, offset printing was very physical, very hands-on. Not like today when I can sit down at my keyboard and, as long as I have my parameters set up, type manuscript pages. No. The typical process was a manuscript, whether it was mine, Gary's, something that came in over the wall, a manuscript. And I would skim it and put it in the probably pile. And I would get enough in the probably pile to sit down and go a little more in depth. And if it made the second cut, then I read it word by word by word and did editing. And very rarely did anything come in, not Gary's either, that didn't need some kind of brushing or touching or whatever. Okay, so I edited the manuscripts using all the standard standard little shorthand symbols of, drop this, add an S, put a letter here, break, typesetting marks. And I would turn it over to my typesetter. And, this would take, I put out a magazine a month. It took 3 or 4 days to go through enough material and edit it and get it ready for the typesetter or the printer. However, I worked both ways. I had typesetters and I had printers that did it all. So that was the first week. Took a couple, 3 days for the printer to bring back what were called at the time blue lines. Now came the physically intense work. Then I had to edit the blue lines to see if there had been any typos by the typesetters or something I missed. And so I did an edit there. Then we took the blue lines, they were called, because it was blue ink on a yellow paper, and they faded away after too many hours in the sun, and it wasn't very many hours. And we took those and we physically cut them up with a razor and a straight edge and made them into columns and worked around holes that we left for art. Now, if I had a picture that was roughly this square and I had a hole that was only this square, I would have to get out my reduction wheel, a round slide rule looking thing, and I'd figure out, okay, the original size was this is what I need, and that gave me a percentage, and so I would write on the art in blue pencil 73%. Whatever. And they would be separate. The blue lines would actually be waxed and laid out. Waxed was a hot burning wax that if you stuck your finger in it by not watching what you were doing or whatever, it hurt like hell. And even so, getting it splashed on you it didn't raise blisters, but you had little red spots on your hand where it had burned, no matter how careful you were. And so we laid out, we had dummy pages, with borders printed on for our use. And we laid them out, cut the bottom, made the breaks with a razor blade, lined everything up, left holes for the ads, left holes for the art, left a hole for the headline, spec'd it. And we did that for every article, every ad. So that took another several days, 2 to 4 days, depending. And so we get that done, we get all done, finish that, and then it goes back to the printer. Now, offset printing was they would take our mock-up, photograph it, make a plate, and print it off of that. So that took a few days, and then it took a few days to print. So the whole process was generally 25 to 28 days. Every magazine. Now, when I started, I was by myself. I was doing Dragon one month and Little Wars the other month. And that continued on for quite a while. So that's all I did. That was my job, my avocation, everything. That's how long it took me. Now today, if today people sent me, electronic files, sent me Word files, for instance, I can take them, reformat them, and plug them in just a little longer than it takes me to read it and edit it. And it automatically fits, and, justified margins and the whole 9 yards. It's easy. So the long part of it is reading the manuscripts and working on them. The layout part's a piece of cake today because of what these computers will do for us. Let's see, what did I get? Okay, so I went to adventure gaming. I loved it. Several cartoonists and writers followed me because they didn't want to work for TSR. So that was wonderful. It ran just about the same in terms of preparation and getting an issue out. Now, at first, as far as articles, I had a bunch of unsolicited stuff, and over the first 12, 15 issues, some pieces I did what I called a heavy edit, which is mainly like a 60% rewrite. And most authors never caught on. They just looked at it and read their articles. God damn, I'm a good writer. Well, in that case, they had good ideas. That didn't really change. The kind of article that I liked the most was about the oddball game that was just a ton of fun. Something out of left field that was a ton of fun. I love turning people on to neat games that they might not have heard of. Just like I like plugging people on this podcast. If you're a good author and I liked your book, I'm going to say something about it. Well, that was adventure gaming. Because Dragon was the same way. If I like something, I publish something about it. Let's see, what else didn't I cover? This is an extensive one. Was there a difference in terms of the workload between the two magazines? No. I went back to a heavier workload when I started AG, because now I was doing it all by myself. Again, when I left TSR, I had Jake and I had Kim. What was the best thing about Adventure Gaming Magazine? The fact that we started to do quite well before the recession hit, and I was feeling pretty proud of myself that I was doing it on my name and not TSR's name. But then Reaganomics failed to trickle. Okay, next. Regarding can I play a Dragonborn in your campaign? I think something that gets missed too often is knowing who you're playing with. The GM runs the game, and ultimately it's their game to run. We have an implied agreement that if we play their game, we agree to their style. If we don't agree, we're free to DM a game ourselves or find someone else to DM. There's nothing wrong with playing a Dragonborn paladin if that's what people like. There is something wrong with thinking that we, both players and GMs, are entitled to make everyone else cater to our whims. Well, I'm going to stop right there. I don't believe it's a whim that I don't like these ramped up, amped up characters. I simply don't like them, and therefore don't use them, and don't allow them in my games. That's not a whim. I've been playing this game since 1974. I know what I like, and I know what I don't. And I don't like these super ooper duper player characters that have all these innate abilities. That's not my style of game. Period. It's a social game above all else. It certainly is. That doesn't mean I'm excusing power-hungry GMs who want it their way or the highway. Well, now here we're going to have another disagreement. Because if you come to my table and you say, I want to be a Dragonborn, blah, 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 and I'll say no, you're free to try to play something else, or there's the door. I feel no compunction about telling somebody whether or not they can play a certain type of character in my campaign. If I think it's a campaign buster, no. I'll be honest. If it's something I don't really understand that all that well, and its subtleties and nuances, no. And if it's going to enable that person to shine unnaturally and rise unnaturally above the rest of the group, absolutely not. Just so you know how I feel about this. We have a method in place to address that. Don't play with them. That's right. A GM who finds themselves without players will learn soon enough. If I'm playing in Tim's game, I know not to play something wild or crazy, and I can still have fun. If I'm playing in Matt Mercer's game, I know what things they like to think are fun, and by playing, I'm agreeing on those things. Communication of expectation goes a long ways. I agree. But where it's most important is at the very beginning, when everybody's trying to establish their character, and nothing bugs the shit out of me worse than somebody that comes in with a 2-page typewritten backstory for a character that hasn't played yet. Because then I would probably tell them, okay, that was beautiful. I'm very moved. Print 2 words after that, the end. Now, let's play another character. You're supposed to create your own backstory. Create your own legend. Don't come in with a backstories, in my opinion, are justifications for having ramped up skills, abilities, or some kind of artifact that your granddaddy gave you. John, again, I refer to Jolly Blackburn, Knights of the Dinner Table. They take backstories to the extreme, particularly Brian. Okay, all in jest, I loathe Dragonborn as much as you do. This new question. Besides, lizard men are way cooler. I cannot argue that. If I was going to play a non-human fighter type, I'd be a lizard man. Absolutely. Those guys are badass. A question. One author that feels to be missing from Appendix N is that Clark Ashton Smith, as he was not only one of the big three of the pulps, Robert E. Howard and Lovecrafting, HLP. I think you meant HPL, H.P. Lovecraft included, but his work had some influence on the game, namely being an inspiration for Rob Kuntz and Eric Holmes, as well as the modules Castle Amber and the Forgotten Temple of Terra Zoom, both of which borrowed from Smith's Aberon and Zotique tales. Any thoughts or insights how Gary felt about Smith, or why he left him out? Well, for myself, I never cared much for his writing style. I don't know exactly why Gary left him out. Gary and I compiled Appendix N on books that we thought, hubristic as that might be, we thought would be helpful to read to get you a better understanding of where the game was coming from and to give you ideas to better play the game. I personally don't ascribe to him a top 3 position, but it's because I don't read him. And I don't follow what other sages of science fiction or fantasy say or do. Neither Gary. And neither one of us thought it was worth being on the list. Personal prejudice, personal choice, whatever. And again, I don't know, Gary might have read every book. But for Gary, it apparently didn't have that impact, or he'd have put it on the list. And, okay, so Rob Kuntz was so Rob read it, so Eric read it. Okay, that lots of other people read it too. But just because they read it and pulled something out of it doesn't necessarily mean it's a great piece. It's just a common influence that the two of them shared. That's all. Apologies if this question has come up before. Next 3 to 6 weeks, I'll be starting a new campaign with a new campaign group. They've all played with me before, and they all want to keep playing with me, so I must be doing something right. You're right. That's the main answer. I want to give them a good game, and I want to keep improving beyond prepping for session and running a game. Is there anything you DMs should do between sessions to improve the game and the running of it? Yep, I've talked about it before in a slightly different context. Go buy 3 or 4 sets, go online, get them cheap as you can, of story dice. I'm telling you, this is the best way to keep your mind sharp. For new DMs particularly, this is a great way to hone the skills you're going to need. Reach into the bag, pull out 3 or 4 story dice, roll them, lay them on the table, line up what the pictures are, and make a hook. Using those 4 facts, make a game hook. Make up something in your head that'll make them want to go do it. Because, as a DM, you do a lot of thinking on your feet. It doesn't matter how well you draw out the dungeon and how well you place the rooms and the traps and everything. The players will always do something you didn't anticipate. So you got to think fast on your feet. That's why I do the Wheel of Blame, because it makes me ad-lib every time I play it. Every encounter is pretty much ad-libbed. And we have lots and lots and lots of fun. And it's getting to the point where if I ran 6 games, I'd probably fill them. But 20 hours is about all I can take over a weekend. So, practice being nimble. If you can find a set that has like shields and swords or dragon or whatever, that's even better. But it really doesn't matter, because all you're really doing is you're training your mind to be flexible and come up with something. Right? I play what my great-granddaughter, Aubrey, calls the story game with her as often as we can. And boy, can she spin a whopper. And if you practice, you will be able to also. And be able to sell it. That's the other thing. As DM, you got to sell it. Even though you know they're going down a bad place, you can't let on. You can't smile. You can't help them. You can't hedge and give them a clue. They got to have their own agency. They have to be able to do what they want to do on their own and live or die by the consequences. Or else it's not good role-playing, I think. I think the best advice I ever received in that is this. Make the next session you run the best session you run. Don't plan a big, slowly unveiling thing that will be cool in 3 months. You can make something that's cool now. You can do both naturally, but always plan to give the best session so far, Don't settle for filler sessions. Great advice. Just plan that it's going to be the best one you've run. And if you go into it with that mindset, it probably will be. 3 Hearts and 3 Lions should be required reading for every 11-year-old boy. I agree. One of the very first fantasy novels that I read, because I came to fantasy somewhat later, and I was still a kid, but I was a teenager. I might have read it while I was in the Navy. Great book, wonderful book. I'm working on a sci-fi RPG right now, and I'm asking anyone I can, what do you think are some aspects of the genre that are essential to sci-fi? Well, technology, whether we know how to work it or it's mysterious, ancient, old, abandoned technology. Aliens. I don't mean necessarily little green guys with big black eyes. I mean otherworldly creatures. And mystery. I really think that's important. You have to have that sense of wonder that makes you want to go turn around that next corner and see what's there. But a well-written sci-fi short story can be interchanged with a well-written fantasy story by simply changing the weapons. Well-written is the key here. Look at Star Wars. Come on. All right, a great movie. Don't get me wrong. But the whole thing had been done before. Not ever this well, but it had been done before. How many times have you heard, oh, such and such, that's just remade this or a version of that or whatever. It's got to have advanced technology, you got to have mystery, and you need aliens. Am I referring to the Fiend Factory from White Dwarf? I didn't mention the name. Yeah, that had more crap, stupid monsters in there. Now, to be fair, well, though I doubt it, it may be that the Brits have a whole different sense of humor, probably, though we both love Monty Python and Benny Hill, and that they think some of what I certainly consider silly monsters in a different light. Because let's face it, a lot of Monty Python was about silly things. But I think it would have been the biggest waste of money anybody ever shelled out for a D&D book. But there again, just my opinion. Okay, yes. Okinawa guys, yes. We're on for this Sunday, the 30th. Yes. Love playing with these guys, even though it's almost the middle of the night for me. I have to start the game at 9:30 a.m. so they can start at 10:30 p.m. in Okinawa. But they're good guys, and it's worth getting up for. Now, let's see. Okay. I love historical fiction. If it's well-researched, well-grounded in its genre or its time period, I love it. And when I find some really good stuff, I like to share it with my friends, and now I'm going to share it with all you, my friends. If you you're interested in pirates, mid to late 17th century, the Spanish Main, etc., you have got to find this book, The Wrath. Oh, I got a glare here. There it is, The Wrath of Brotherhood by Oscar Sahin. I met the gentleman at Game Hole. He was having a special on Thursday, a special convention first day price, and I bought both books. And there's a third one coming in this arc. And they're really, really well researched. Not that he tries to knock you over with, technical minutia or anything. Well researched, good yarn, and that doesn't always go hand in hand. Highly recommended. I don't know what press it is, but I'm sure Ozgur Sahin, Ozgur try that again, Sahin, Ozgur Sahin, The Wrath of Brotherhood. It's part of this Brethren of the Spanish Main series. Really good book. Both of them. I've read the first one, I'm halfway through. Okay, now, what's next? Okay, Gamehole. I went to Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin last week. Now, they're considerably north of us, and it is late October. But thanks to the global warming that some people want to deny, and the climate change, I found an oddity that would seem to support something's weird, because the farther north we drove, the warmer it got. Go figure. It was 71, 75 that weekend. Good con. Alex runs a very good con, very well organized, very good staff. The only minor gripe I might have is that, and they did a workaround for me, is that because of the cost of printing schedules, it's now on one of those QR code things. You scan it, and then you find your game or what you're looking for, or whatever. Nice, interesting dealer hall. Wonderful food trucks. Many more food trucks than before. Wonderful variety. I had great tacos. I had a killer grilled Cuban panini. And there's one particular vendor that I want to warn anybody in the Midwest to be on the lookout to see if they show up at your con. They're called Critical Role Soda. And that's what they are. They're drinks. And you can do they have a whole board full of standard drinks. Their concoctions. Or then on the bottom they have the potion list of all the flavors that you have. So you can choose a base. I chose lemonade. You could have chosen Coke or Dr. Pepper or Pepsi or Sprite, I think. I chose Mountain Dew. I chose lemonade. I had a squirt of Rotary Red grapefruit, a squirt of lime, and a squirt of sour. Oh my heavens, what a heavenly potion. If you see them anywhere in the Midwest, check them out. Critical Role Soda. Good con. I don't believe that anybody's numbers are back up to where they were pre-pandemic, but they're getting close. I was delighted by the percentage of female gamers, even more delighted by the percentage of juvenile gamers. It happened that I had on the first night a dad playing in one of my games. And he said, well, both my daughters are signed up for your games later. I said, in the same game? They said, no, they're in different games. Okay. Dad was a good player. The youngest daughter, who played, they're both in high school. I'm not sure. God knows, I can't tell. Two daughters, they're both in high school. I'm thinking junior, sophomore, or senior, sophomore. I don't mean to insult either one of them. But Caitlin, you know who you are. One of the most fun players that I've had at my table in years. Asked questions, came up with plans on the fly, came up with plans B, C, D, E, asked good questions about, wait a minute, what if we do this, what if that? just a joy. And when I can get a young player at my table like that, I go, okay, we're not dead yet. And she just loved playing old school. I don't think that was the edition she was familiar with, with the way I play. But she had the whole vibe of role-playing down. And she was good. Had good ideas. It was just a joy. And so that was one of the little mini highlights of my weekend, was having a fun player like that at my table. She was just amazing. Okay. D20 Delving funded. And about 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be making the recordings. And it's due to ship in January. There is a website up, or at least a Facebook page. I know that. And I'll see if I can't stick a link on the end of this. And you ought to check it out. It's going to be cool. It's going to be the most inclusive, capable game that's ever come out. So check it out. I'm delighted that it funded. Just delighted, because I really want to be a part of this. And, okay, for the Patreons at the highest level, we're going to have a 2-hour Q&A on the 12th of November. That's a Saturday night. I asked, and the majority of the Patreon people said stick with Saturday. So the rest of you, when it's hard, I'm sorry. I'll try to start making the announcements a couple weeks in advance. And that'll allow you maybe a little more time to be home at a certain time. They'll probably be 10 to 12 Eastern time. I know that's rough on the West Coast, but I don't want to start much later than that, because I've never had a 2-hour Q&A yet go 2 hours. I wish. They always run longer. That's all I got right now. Vote. Vote. The only way we can change anything we don't like is to vote. Now, we may be just tossing a single pebble into the stream, but if enough of us throw enough pebbles, we'll stop the damn stream and divert it. Be a pebble. Don't sit on your ass at home and say, I can't do anything. Vote. It's your most sacred right as a citizen. And on that admonitory tone, I'll say, Dodada Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.